Hello and welcome. My name is Janet Marchibroda, and I'm the Executive Director of NFL Alumni Health at the NFL Alumni Association. We were founded in 1967 by a small group of successful retired players, and we're one of the oldest and most well-respected retired player organizations in professional sports. Our members include former NFL players, coaches, front office staff, and others involved in the game. And we've got a terrific group of more than 15,000 former NFL players who connect with us on many of our programs, particularly health. And that's important because our whole mission is really about caring for our own, caring for children, and caring for the community. And with that in mind, earlier this year, we launched a program focused on advancing regenerative medicine and cell-based therapies for our former NFL players, as well as all patients in our country. It's a really important time for the field. There are more than 800 active clinical trials going on in the US today, covering a range of conditions that are important for former athletes. This is work that I'm fairly familiar with, given my role with the Independent Alliance for Cell Therapy now, a coalition of academic and research leaders who are advancing the field, particularly through these clinical studies. I'm really pleased to be moderating a session today with some of our nation's foremost leaders and experts in the field. They're joining us here at the World Stem Cell Summit and the Wake Forest Institute of Regenerative Medicine Essentials course to talk about this topic, regenerative medicine for professional athletes. Joining us today, we're really delighted to have Dr. Jaime Garza, Professor of Orthopedic Surgery, Professor of Otolaryngology, and Director of Human Regenerative Cell Trials at Tulane University in Louisiana in the School of Medicine. And he also serves as Professor of Surgery and Professor of Otolaryngology at the University of Texas in San Antonio. We're also really pleased to have Dr. James Kovach, Chief Innovation Officer, Aggie Square, UC Davis, Sacramento Innovation Center, and Director of Translational, Entrepreneurship, and Industry Research Relationships at the University of California, Davis. And finally, so pleased to have Dr. Claude T. Moorman join us. Dr. Moorman is the president of Atrium Health's Musculoskeletal Institute and the Edward N. Hanley Jr. Endowed Chair of the Department of Orthopedic Surgery. And with that, I'm hoping to kick things off. I'm hoping each of you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, your interest and work in regenerative medicine and cell therapies. Dr. Garza, let me start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Janet, and thanks to the entire panel for being here. This is a real pleasure and an honor. My background is I'm actually a board certified plastic and reconstructive surgeon, and I'm board certified in head and neck surgery. I also have a background as a dentist. So my research work started many years ago in the School of Bioengineering at LSU in New Orleans. At the University of Pittsburgh, I was blessed to work with a great group of surgeons and researchers and started work in adipose-derived therapies. And since that time, this is back in 1992, I've continued work in this field. My background is an academic surgeon. I was chairman of a department at the University of Texas, and I'm currently in the Department of Orthopedics, as you stated, helping them develop and continue this regenerative medicine trial work at Tulane. I'm also an ex-collegiate football player and a former NFL football player, although I didn't last as long as Dr. Kovach did, but I'm very pleased to be involved as a member of the NFL Alumni in this work.
Dr. Kovach?
Yes, I join Jaime in thanking everyone for the opportunity to be on this panel. I was able to play football at University of Kentucky and got into medical school and got drafted and the same time, so was able to basically play for 7 years and attend medical school during off seasons in the 80s as I made my way through University of Kentucky and for the Saints and Niners. And afterwards, really got interested in innovation and was at Case Western Reserve University in the 90s when I met Arnie Kaplan and learned about stem cells and the potential power in therapeutic applications. So became very interested in that. Currently, I'm at the University of California, Davis, where we really have a unique set of resources. We have a good manufacturing practices facility where we manufacture cell therapies. We have a clinic that provides clinical trials that's supported by the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine. And certainly, orthopedic and sports applications of regenerative medicine remain top of mind, although for reasons we will discuss, the goal has remained elusive, and we can go into that and how it impacts former NFL players. So I want to say hello to all my colleagues out there and look forward to participating on the panel.
Dr. Moorman, could you share a little bit about yourself and your interest in the field?
Sure, Janet. I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and unlike Jaime and Jim, didn't really make it to the NFL. Had a couple free agent deals, but I was going to be a camp buddy, so I went on to medical school. But have great interest and always aspired to being a team physician in the NFL, and had the great opportunity through my orthopedic training at Duke and then my fellowship at Special Surgery, where I worked with Ronnie Barnes and the Giants. Got interested and then had the opportunity to be the head team physician for the Baltimore Ravens when they moved from Cleveland and through their first 6 seasons, culminating in the Super Bowl. So it was great to leave that with a Super Bowl ring, and then was the head team physician at Duke for the past 20 years before moving to Charlotte in January of 18. So my interest in regenerative medicine comes from a lot of the ailments that we all face, as former players, predominantly some early knee arthritis, some early shoulder OA, maybe some tendon injuries. And I was introduced to Carlo Tremolata, actually through Bill Futrell, who was a common link for many of us on this call, who was really one of the early pioneers in adipose cellular therapies. And Carlo had developed the lipogems method, which was a microfragmentation method for adipose tissue. And so he was kind enough to come over when I was at Duke back in 2015, and we did the first of the lipogems procedures in North America. And then with Champ Baker and Bob Stanton, some of the leaders in the Sports Medicine Society, we visited Italy with Carlo and also with Zorzi's group down in Verona and the folks there in Milan, and really became quite inspired and developed a pretty robust program that we started at Duke, and had a network of primary care docs and had a lot of experience with the adipose therapy. So that's my background. And moving to Charlotte, we've developed a network here as well, centering around our primary care physicians. And I still, in my limited bandwidth in clinical practice, still do some cases in the OR 1 day a week, and have branched out with Michael Karstens and David Matthews, who are plastic surgeons who you all know. And we're working on setting up another trial now with the GID programming and stromal vascular fraction. Excited about that. And also very excited, you all may not know that Atrium Health has merged with Wake Forest. So it's been great to join Tony Italis' family, who I've admired for many years and work for his work in this space. And so we have a big happy family now in the Southeast working together on these therapies, and really excited to offer this to our NFL colleagues and friends, and hopefully we can really be helpful to them going forward.
Tony's been terrific, and just bringing us together with the Regenerative Medicine Essentials course. I just know over the years have educated so many folks across the spectrum, and really delighted that the three of you could join us for this session. I'd like to talk, for all, when we talk about regenerative medicine and cell therapies, maybe to provide some context, could you share what are the conditions that are most prevalent for former athletes? Could you share a little bit about that before we get into the therapy discussion?
Well, my work in particular it stems from really my injuries as well. I mean, I suffered the maladies of all of us who played football for so long with knee osteoarthritis. I tore my ACL, which is really what ended my football playing days. But also I was a concussion kid. I had more concussions than most anybody I knew. So my early interest was with Joe Maroon at the University of Pittsburgh in cellular therapy for the treatment of, what we call, CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. But from that, my work spun into working with musculoskeletal problems, particularly rotator cuff injuries and knee osteoarthritis, in conjunction, hand in hand with my orthopedic colleagues. A great group out of San Antonio, the Sports Medicine Associates, San Antonio, were the team physicians for the San Antonio Spurs, and then at Tulane, of course, with great buddy Savoie and his group of faculty members.
Dr.
Yeah,
Kovach?
I think basically there's some great work done in North Carolina by the Injury Prevention Research Center that, in a nutshell, shows that former NFL players get the same sort of arthritic problems that the aging population does, just multiple times more frequently, right? So it's just a much higher prevalence. And you look around the locker room of people trying to get ready for the next game, and it's generally the same sort of indications that are, that 30 years later or less impact former NFL players. So it's knees, ankles, shoulders, and one as much hip problems, but that whole chain, the lower chain, basically is under so much stress, throughout an NFL career that with the latency of aging and then late stage manifestations of osteoarthritis, that's what you're going to see, and I'm sure that our audience is seeing that themselves at a higher frequency. Not everyone, of course, but too many.
Dr. Moorman, anything to add? Conditions of former players, former athletes.
Yeah, I think most of us and most of our NFL colleagues that are past their career time are suffering from early OA in their knees, ankles, hips, and many of them are young enough that they don't want total joint replacements. So they find themselves in that treatment gap where we know that a scope alone for a clean out is probably not going to last them very long. And I think that's become my primary indication for the cellular therapies, with or without arthroscopy. And then a particular emphasis on shoulder arthritis, because this is something that seems to selectively, in younger patients, involve former NFL athletes and former military folk who want to remain active. They still want to put a roof on a house or pull a 10-point buck out of the woods or lift weights, and they're not ready for a shoulder replacement. And my experience with adipose therapies in that group has been particularly encouraging. So I think I would add those. And then in the younger patients, I think that the soft tissue injuries have been very well treated, particularly intramuscular pec tears, big hamstring injuries with a palpable defect. And I've really enjoyed using the therapies in that group, and that's been particularly successful as well.
Like to quote Billy Davis at NFL Alumni. What does he say? It's a young man's game, but an older man's burden, playing football. But just sort of building on Dr. Moorman's comments about how regenerative medicine or cell therapies can help. Could we talk about that more? Given all of these ailments, are there potential treatments or treatments or trials? How can regenerative medicine and cell therapy help?
Well, I can speak to just the early phase 1 and phase 2 trials that we've performed, with our group at the Sports Medicine Associates, and then the Rothman Institute, and also a group out of New Jersey. We published those findings in the American Journal of Sports Medicine. And there is a lot of promise, there's no question, or we wouldn't be going into these phase 3 trials, which we're actively involved in right now. I'm heading up a knee osteoarthritis phase 3 trial, as well as a rotator cuff injury phase 3 trial at both of the sites that I'm working at. The promise is fantastic. We need more proof, obviously. We need more proof of concept. We need more patients enrolled. It's very, very difficult to enroll qualified patients into these FDA trials because they're so strict in terms of inclusion, exclusion criteria. But the early results, and I say early, I've been working on this space for about 12 years now in these trials, is very, very encouraging. But being scientists and physician scientists that we are, we really need to nail down efficacy and safety over a long term. And I think that's sort of where we're heading right now. Obviously, I think we all know the biggest limiting factor is lack of funding for these trials. So I've been involved in working with some of our leaders in the Hill in Washington, as well as here in Austin and in Louisiana and Baton Rouge.
Dr. Garza, what was interesting to me, you mentioned that you're involved in phase 3 trials in this area. I would say you're one of the few that you could probably count on less than 2 hands. I know that the group Alliance for Cell Therapy has done some analysis of active trials in the US. And as you mentioned, I think more than 95% are phase 1 or phase 2 trials and sort of sitting, not able to get to that next level. And you talked about federal funding being important to help with that. Dr. Kovach or Dr. Moorman, any other thoughts about how regenerative medicine and cell therapies could help with some of the conditions? I know you talked a little bit about it, but if you could expand on how these therapies can help former athletes.
Well, from my perspective, what has always been fascinating and exciting is the possibility, and we've seen in clinical trials and other indications, the restoration of actually the native tissue environment. It's just not a treatment where you're removing or shaving or this or that. You're actually restoring, and that comes with challenges relating to, can you do it in one particular dose, or does it take multiple doses? But it's been well established that regenerative medicine, as its name implies, has the prospect of actually restoration, which to me, in light of what Dr. Moorman is talking about, these gaps between, initial symptoms to players that undergo the stress of NFL, playing in the NFL, and life expectancy, it would be huge, So it's exciting, but requires clinical validation, as Jaime had mentioned. But to me, that's been the holy grail.
Dr. Moorman, any thoughts to add?
Yeah, Janet, I think one of the things as a former NFL player you need to think about is there are a lot of unscrupulous actors out there. And I think what Peter Marks has challenged all of us, I think, to really up our game. And one of the things that took effect June 1st is sort of the end of the grace period, if you will, for allegations and off-label use and marketing for sort of unsubstantiated outcomes. So I think that'll help clean up the space a lot. And working with board certified physicians, I think, is really critical for our players to know going in. And one of the things that I've been through with the adipose therapies, at least is what we currently have approved for indications for orthopedic surgery or for arthroscopy, which we have for the microfragmented fat and the centrifuge fat now, is that it is good for early OA. There's clear, and it'll be pretty well substantiated soon and more impressive trials than my own. But that's a good indication. I think the early OA in the shoulder is a good indication for that. PRP has been shown now in level 1 trials. The leukocyte-poor PRP for early OA and a neutral alignment is a good therapy. For the tendinopathies, the elbows, tennis elbow, we can extend it to golfer's elbow, though our N is very small there. It's been very good in that scenario too. Beats corticosteroid every time, beats surgery most of the time. So those are real encouraging findings. But I think that's going to be the key next phase. And I'm really excited about Jaime's work and getting these level 1 trials, which are extremely difficult in orthopedic surgery, extremely difficult. And we're just entering into the GID trial now, and it's a phase 1 trial, but it'll be randomized 3-to-1 to placebo for early knee arthritis. And those are the kind of things that will answer the question and really highlight the indications, because that's what we really need to know is what therapy is good for what circumstance. And that's where we'll really be able to help our NFL alums.
So you talked about June 1st being an important date. And I know, a number of our players are trying to figure out, they don't know where to go. They don't know how to navigate the field. They know that many of these, the majority of these treatments need to be FDA approved. There are advertisements. There are lots of clinics out there that are offering these products. Any advice? Like how does a non-scientist, non-clinician navigate this field? What do we do?
Well, I would start off by saying, as we have in past conferences with the NFL alumni, is that, buyer beware. I think Dr. Moorman emphasized that if you go into, if you read an advertisement in the newspaper, you go into a clinic when they promise that these stem cells are going to cure everything from headaches to sinus infections to osteoarthritis to spinal stenosis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then, buyer, caveat emptor, buyer beware. Also, you need to ask if this is an FDA approved product. Is it an FDA approved indication? Just because something's FDA approved. So in the plastics world, Botox is something that's used obviously for beauty purposes. However, it has been used off-label as well for other indications. The FDA has come down really hard on cellular products. Most physicians have the right and the licensing to use something off-label. However, the FDA has really come down hard on cellular products and has really banned, as of June 1st, as Dr. Moorman said, any off-label uses for anything that's FDA approved. And the audience, most of the scientists in this and physicians in this audience know that the only FDA approved cellular therapies, meaning stem cell therapies, have to do with blood disorders, leukemia, and then of course some very, very rare conditions that are treated with umbilical cord stem cells. But that's it. Nothing else in terms of stem cell or cellular therapy is FDA approved for use unless it's under an FDA approved clinical trial. And that's where I hope that we, as the NFL alumni, are going to be able to guide our membership in the right directions.
Dr. Kovach or Dr. Moorman, any thoughts, insights on how to help patients navigate, given what's happening out there?
Well, I can at least comment on what I know and have felt myself as a former player and a current player is the strong desire to get back, to get back to normal, and therein lies the difficulty, because you have basically these opportunities, to either participate or through point of care, I guess I would call it, right in the office kinds of procedures to undergo these procedures. And I think that's where the discipline of former NFL players to ask the right questions really comes in. With respect to, converting on that, I think on the flip side, we need to really advocate and really support the companies like GID and others that are providing rigorous clinical trials. UC Davis is actually a clinical site as well. So, and it goes beyond that as well to institutionally really kind of support the federal government in the different aspects of providing funding to really bring these products to market in a rigorous way.
I couldn't agree more. I talked about the analysis of the more than 800 trials, and very few of them, particularly if you look at MSCs and SVF and some of the other therapies that you all are talking about that can be really helpful to former athletes, are for the most part, they're conducted within academic institutions or small biotechs for the most part. There are some wonderful trials going on out there, but they don't have federal funding. And I think that's a big gap, actually. And I think with more support, we could help get some of these these trials with promising results over the finish line. But Dr. Moorman, I mean, any other, with your patients and with, the guys that played when you were a team physician, I mean, any insights or advice on what questions should they ask? I mean, even a checklist or what questions should they ask before they undergo treatment or participate in a clinical trial, sort of building on your colleagues' comments.
Well, Janet, one of the things as far as resources, particularly for the NFL players, is what you all are doing together. As far as I know, the NFL group that you put together is the only one to consistently fund cellular therapies for any group of people. And so checking in with you, because you're going to have a database of qualified practitioners that you're going to be referring people to, and that's a tremendously powerful resource for them. There are other associations around that are very good as well. I'm involved in the Biologic Association, and we do webinars frequently. Seth Sherman is sort of our ramrod to put the programs together, and there was a webinar last night. But they have the support of the Arthroscopy Association of North America, American Orthopedic Society for Sports Medicine, American Medical Society for Sports Medicine, American Shoulder and Elbow Surgeons, and so forth, a lot of reputable groups. And so that's a think tank, I think, and a website that people could use as a resource, Biologic Association, for finding practitioners that would be qualified to help. Ultimately, it's trust in your doctor, and that's why I say, get the right doctor and ask them what their recommendation is. And the folks on this panel are a great group to start with, and you can work out from there. And I know you've got your network, but I think that's the way to do it. It's going to be the Wild West for a while. I think Jaime was exactly right. It's buyer beware, and be skeptical, like you are with any consumer activity, and check out your practitioner and check out their results.
Well, we at NFL Alumni and in collaboration with Alliance for Cell Therapy now hope to provide some of these resources with guidance from experts such as yourselves, developing almost like a patient primer, or, with frequently asked questions and what questions should I ask before I pursue treatment? And you've provided some of the answers here. Or there are lots of clinical trials. What questions should I ask before engaging in a clinical trial? And you've talked a lot about a lot of them here. And for that, we're grateful. So I know we're wrapping up, but I'm hoping that each of you could offer some of your key takeaways or thoughts for our audience. And let me start with you, Dr. Garza.
I just want to encourage our congressional leaders at the state level, at the federal level, to really strongly consider funding these trials. We've brought it a long way over the last decade and a half on our own sweat and blood and tears. And it's really time now to push us over the top of the mountain. I have a love and a passion for my former NFL brothers and sisters as well. And of course, all of my patients and all of our patients. And I really want to see this, what I think is a potentially tremendous treatment, proven that it does work, and then bring it to market with.
Thank you. Dr. Kovach, any key takeaways for our audience?
Yeah, I just want to say I definitely get it from both personal and professional experience that former ballers, they get osteoarthritis earlier, it's more severe, and it's a huge issue because lifespan is a lot of decades to live. So and then there are these opportunities out there, but every kind of non-IRB approved therapy that's in a plastic surgeon's office with a pop-up is one subject for a clinical trial that is not eligible anymore. And so hopefully we can work together to get education on the front end. And then of course we need funding on the back end to support Jaime and Dr. Moorman and others. I'm a business guy myself, but major health systems like UC Davis, like my health system, is up to the vice chancellor and our dean of school of medicine, who actually is from Wake Forest, are totally behind rigorous clinical trials because they affect in a negative way so many individuals, and loss of mobility is connected with many things like obesity, diabetes, and other. So it's an amplifier. It's a huge issue, and here we go. The NFL players are on the front end of it, and I know that they can, with the proper education, rise to the challenge.
Dr. Kovach, I think about the work that you're doing in California, and the taxpayers, the voters in California, providing for folks who don't know it, last November approved a ballot measure for $5.5 billion in funding for research in this area. And you can see it in the data. I mean, we see a lot of exciting discoveries coming out of California institutions as a result of that investment in the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine. So a great model.
Yeah, and I know Dr. Maria Milan, who's the CEO of CIRM, as it's called, the California Institute of Regenerative Medicine, is associated with your work, Janet, and really, if we can get the right programs and, again, rigorous clinical trials, there's definitely not only interest in funding, but there's a market. I mean, one of the things we need to develop is a market to incentivize GID Bio and many others to actually do the work and support the trials, which they can't bill anyone for, in order to approve the therapies. And so that's kind of what I call the back end of what we need to do. The front end is working with the players, and the back end is getting the business model working in orthopedics and regenerative and restorative medicine.
Thank you. And Dr. Moorman, last word, any key takeaways for our audience?
Yeah, Janet, I have a dream. Here's my dream, and it's in conjunction with the Atrium Health mission vision statement, which is that we want to be the first and best choice of care for all. And so the for all part is the left out piece of regenerative medicine therapy. I had the great privilege of spending time in Italy, as I mentioned to you all, and the Italians have good enough data that they've been able to convince their version of Medicare to fund the cellular therapies. So it's available to all of their citizens there. We got to get to that point here, because right now, when you're paying out of pocket, even at the discounted rates that we have in our system, it's a minimum of $500 for a PRP. It's $3,500 for lipogems. Maybe it'll be more for GID. We don't know when that is hopefully released and proven. But we've got to get the government funding for these studies, as Jaime mentioned, to show the results. And then once we have the results, we need to leverage the payers to support this for all of our American citizens, because it's just, the upside is just too great. And it's a really exciting time, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see this play out. And I think this is going to be the next phase in medicine, and just couldn't be more excited about being a part of that.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for such an insightful discussion. I think that wraps it up. On behalf of NFL Alumni, the World Stem Cell Summit, and the Wake Forest Institute of Regenerative Medicine, thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.